Yesterday at this time, I was doing a taped interview with Marco Rubio, just as these tweets were coming to light from Democratic presidential candidates and others berating this latest development in California on guns. We would later come to find that it wasn't quite that black and white. And when I raised it with Marco Rubio, he wanted to point that out, even before we had a full dimension of what was really going on. He was right. Listen.
I think the left often pivots to gun laws, but the truth is states like California, for example, have very strict gun laws, as they do in Illinois and Chicago, as they do in Washington, D.C., as they do in many other jurisdictions that have significant amount of gun violence. So it's never been shown that these gun laws are effective other than in keeping guns out of the hands of law-abiding citizens. So instead of all these focus on gun control, we should be focused on what's causing this violence. We don't know about this particular case, but we know about others where mental illness often plays a key and critical role.
Do you get a sense of, given more violent incidents around the globe, and I'm even putting Paris in that mix, that there is a sense of global disorder?
Well, there most certainly is a global disorder, and it's driven by rogue countries like North Korea and Iran, by a gangster in Moscow, by Chinese aggression and expansion in the Asia-Pacific region, and by radical Islamic jihadists, not just ISIS, but Al-Qaeda and so forth. So there's certainly disorder globally. I'm not sure it's directly related to any of what's happening here domestically in the United States. What we have here is a combination of mental illness, but also in some of the gun crime that's occurring in this country is criminal activity, individuals shooting at each other, a bystander gets shot or whatever it may be. And I think we have to ask ourselves, what has happened in this country where something like life and the values that create a strong society have been undermined? And the answer is you see a breakdown in family, you see a hostility towards the institutions in society that reinforce these values, and you see that reflected in crime statistics, in the jail population, and in many other challenges that we face as a country.
Senator, if I can move to politics, in the latest polls, you're in second and one of the fastest surging candidates, period, right now. Did you envision when you first entered this race that you'd be where you are now?
Well, I'm not sure where I am in terms of the polls, because the polls come and go. They're up and down, you know, and in terms of the polls, where you are depends on which poll you're reading. We don't pay a lot of attention to that. It's relevant in the sense that it determines where you stand on the stage at the debate. But other than that, it really doesn't matter until you get to February and people actually start voting and it counts. I've always felt optimistic about our campaign. You can go back months and you can see that we've always believed that as long as we continue to lay out our vision for America's future and the ideas that what it will take to get us there, we've always felt people would respond to that very positively. So we're going to continue to run a campaign that's realistically focused on our challenges, but also optimistically focused on our opportunities. I think America has the opportunity to be greater than she's ever been, but there's some things we're going to have to do. We're not on the right direction right now. We need to change that.
You know, Senator, having had a chance to chat with you in the last debate on Fox Business Network, one thing is very clear, that your emergence now has gotten the attention of some of your competitors, including Christie, who dismisses you, well, he speaks highly personally of you, as too young and inexperienced. I want you to react to Christie commenting on, I guess, new.
Does Marco have the experience to be president?
Listen, he doesn't have my experience. You know, I've been through the fire here. New is wonderful. It's great. It's shiny. It's untarnished. And everybody loves new. It's really exciting. New is great until you need experience.
What did you think of that?
Well, look, when you run for president, all these candidates are going to look for what they need to say to convince you to vote for them instead of someone else. So it's a normal part of that process. I like Christie. We get along well. I think he's a good guy. We agree on a lot of issues. I can only tell you who I am and what I've done. And if you look at foreign policy, for example, I say this repeatedly, with all due respect, I don't think there's anybody on that stage that has a better understanding or has shown better judgment on the issues confronting our country than I have. Whether it's what's happening with ISIS, what's happening now in Libya, what's happening in Syria, what's happening with Russia and the Middle East, time and again, sometimes years before it happened, we clearly warned of what the consequences would be of our current policies under the Obama administration. So we'll continue to focus on that, and we'll let the voters decide who has the right temperament, judgment, and experience to guide our country here into the 21st century. And I remain confident that they'll decide we're the right people for that.
Given your personal friendship with Christie, then you would entertain him as a possible running mate?
Well, we're far too early in this process to talk about any of it. As I said, and no one else is going to talk about it. He's running for president. I'm sure he wants to win as much as I do. So we're going to focus on that. And I will say we have a very talented group of Republicans running. We're very fortunate. None of our candidates is under FBI investigation, and none of our candidates is an avowed socialist. So we have a strong field, and I think it's going to give us a strong nominee, someone who can unite our party, because if we're not united, we can't win, but also attract new people to vote for us who perhaps in the past haven't voted for us because the Democrats convinced them we don't care about people like them. We do. And we're going to show how limited government, free enterprise, and a strong national defense, the key pillars of a strong conservative movement, are better for all Americans than what Barack Obama is doing now.
When you have people like David Petraeus and Madeleine Albright petitioning Congress to say, look, it's not a good idea to stall the Syrian refugees and their influx into the United States, that it sends the wrong message, and then to ink it, they get Henry Kissinger to agree. Do you think they're saying that Congress is overdoing it on freezing refugees and that you're making a big mistake? And then in your case as a presidential candidate, it's actually hurting the party?
Well, look, here's the thing. My position isn't that it's not that we don't want to accept refugees, is that we may not be able to accept most of them, because you can't accept people from that part of the world unless they're fully vetted, and most of them cannot be fully vetted. We just don't have accurate databases or information to vet them against. And this is a very unique refugee crisis. In the past, we've understood a lot more about the refugees because they were fleeing communism, they were fleeing something else. But in this case, it's a very unique situation where you have a group like ISIS that is openly trying to use the refugee crisis as a way to insert foreign fighters into the West, where you have people coming from a part of the world where radicalism is growing, where we don't have anything on which to vet them against or compare them to. So common sense still applies. I mean, if it's a 7-year-old child, if it's a 90-year-old widow, if it's a well-known Chaldean priest, these are people you can vet. But a vast number of them are people we will not be able to vet. And given what's happening around the world today, we cannot accept people into this country who we don't know who they are or why they're coming. And that's a big problem. And I understand it's a unique challenge, but it's one we face here in the 21st century that we have to take very seriously.
You know, Senator, I know you're very busy on the campaign trail, but ISIS has just released another video, I guess, showing how it would target New York and Washington, a host of other cities. But I always wonder, Senator, how this even gets up to begin with, and it just premieres, and then they try to clamp down and try to hide the video. If you became president, what would you do about that? Because there are a lot of privacy rights enthusiasts who say, don't go too far. What you do to sort of weed out bad guys, threatens the freedom of all guys.
Well, first we have to understand why ISIS does this. They're trying to attract people to an apocalyptic vision of Islam. I mean, they openly brag and talk about that they are motivated by a desire to trigger a final apocalyptic showdown between the West and their version of Islam. And so we have to understand that's what motivates them, and that's why they put out this propaganda. It tells you they're not going to go away on their own. They have to be defeated. But I think we need to put out counter-propaganda that actually tells the truth about what life is like under ISIS control, that actually undermines their effectiveness in the minds of their potential recruits. Propaganda has always been a part of every conflict we've ever been involved in, and I think it needs to be a part of this one. We need to cut off the flow of people that are either joining ISIS or being radicalized by them by offering clear and counter information. Now, we still have to defeat them militarily, obviously, but we have to deal with this propaganda war that they're waging, because this is how they attract fighters. That's why they put out those videos, is they're hoping to inspire people to join them, either by conducting homegrown lone wolf attacks here in the United States or by literally traveling to Libya and joining their cause over there.
How would you take the fight to them if you became president? Because our fear has been collateral damage would go after ISIS positions, and we avoid it. Would you accept as president, Senator, the collateral damage and the real likelihood of them going after ISIS strongholds? You would likely be killing citizens.
Well, the thing, we would certainly want to diminish them, but here's the point. When an adversary is openly using innocent civilians as human shields, you cannot guarantee that civilian casualties will be zero. We will take all the best efforts possible to avoid them, and we will certainly not target civilians, but we cannot allow them to use them as human shields in a way to impede our objective. Ultimately, ISIS cannot be defeated solely from the air. They have to be defeated on the ground by an armed group, and it has to be made up primarily of Sunni Arabs. If it's Western forces, it won't work. Kurds are not interested in fighting. They can't liberate Sunni villages. Kurds are only interested in fighting in those parts of the country, or those countries where there are Kurds. It has to be defeated by a ground force made up primarily of Sunni Arabs. It will require more special operators and more airstrikes.
I'm sorry, but what if it's more American ground forces? We've heard talk of about 200 additional ground troops. Your opponent in this race, Lindsey Graham, has said it's got to be 10,000, and the numbers go back and forth. That American boots on the ground, it's just unavoidable if you want to take the fight to ISIS.
Well, there will have to be a significant number of special operators on the ground to help with the airstrikes, to help with the training, to help coordinate high-profile assaults. Well, I don't think there's a magic number. People are throwing around numbers as if there's a magic number to it. I would say that it has to be based on the tactics. We lay out the objective to military commanders. They present to us their plan to achieve that objective, and embedded in that plan will be the number of fighters that they need to help accomplish it. And that's what we would make our decision based on. We have not yet heard from our military experts what the number should be, because the president hasn't laid out a clear strategy about what it is we are trying to achieve. ISIS cannot be contained. They have to be defeated. And in order to defeat this group, who is trying to lure us into a ground war against them with primarily Western forces, because it fits into their narrative that they're going to trigger this apocalyptic final showdown in the city of Dabiq in Syria. That's why their magazine is named Dabiq. That's what they're trying to do in many ways. We have to ensure that they are rejected ideologically and defeated militarily, primarily by Sunni Arab fighters, but we are going to have to put special operators alongside them. What the right number is will be determined by the tactical plan that our military commanders present.
You know, separately, as you've been hearing on a domestic issue that's getting a lot of attention, Obamacare, United Healthcare, the latest insurance company, perhaps the biggest one to say these exchanges are killing us, they're costing us an arm and a leg, and we just might opt out. Other insurers, Aetna and a host of others, have said, much as you kind of telegraphed a few years ago, Senator, that they would be coughing up some money and this wouldn't be the draw it was. Now, that is the great backstop for Obamacare, the key funding mechanism. So if they opt out of the exchanges, then you have to wonder how you finance this, and an issue of a bailout has come to mind. In other words, that since there are 8 to 12 million Americans who picked up insurance, you can't leave them high and dry. What do you say?
Well, we had these exchanges. What people don't realize is that under Obamacare, there is something called a high-risk corridor. It's a bailout fund. And what it basically says is that if these companies participate in the exchange and they lose money, they can go after taxpayer money to bail them out for their losses. Last year, I was successful in getting language at the end of the year in the budget bill that took that bailout money away. And as a result, these companies have lost money, and now some of them are talking about dropping out.
Did you know
Next week, we're going to have to do it again.
Would happen, that this was your own way to get a self-fulfilling prophecy?
No, absolutely. In fact, I've been talking about it since 2013. I've been saying these companies are going to lose money and they're going to come to the American taxpayer for a bailout. And because I was able to achieve what we did last year, we saved the American taxpayer $2.5 billion of taxpayer money.
And Darrell Issa has quoted that and commended you for that, and why one of the reasons he's supporting you. But I guess the question comes back to, well, you've saved all of this money and you've avoided a means by which insurance companies can get someone to help them out. You do have to risk the issue of a lot of the people who have health care losing that health care, right? What do you do?
Well, that's not the issue. The issue is that the health care plan that's been created is not a sustainable plan. It cannot exist, and it cannot move forward without us bailing out private insurance companies.
No, I know what you're saying.
And that was the argument that was made from the beginning.
If Hillary Clinton were the nominee, Senator, she will say these 8 to 12 million have lost their insurance because Senator Rubio put that provision in to choke off coverage, to choke off the insurers, and eventually to choke off all those people.
Well, that argument can be used to bail out with taxpayer money any industry in America. And at that point, why shouldn't we bail everybody out? Not just insurance companies, but the airlines, the automakers, everyone could be bailed out then. Here's the bottom line. I don't just want to repeal Obamacare, and I think if we can continue with this bailout fund, it continues to damage these exchanges, and as a result, you'll see less companies participating in them. But beyond that, I think that we need to replace it. We need to replace it with a system that allows every American, whether it's through a refundable tax credit or their own employers giving them money to buy any health insurance they want from any company in America across state lines that is willing to sell it to them. That is a much better way to help people get insurance than a plan that requires the American taxpayer to bail out private insurance companies who have decided to cozy up to the Obama administration.
Real quickly, sir, we're hearing from some in the Republican Party, this memo, this private memo, others not so private, saying the party has to come up with a plan to stop Donald Trump, that he would damage the party. John McCain worried that a Trump nominee would kill the party's chances, even risk losing the Senate as a result. Do you agree with that?
Look, we're going to have a strong nominee. I don't believe it'll be Donald Trump because I believe it's going to be me. That's why I'm running for president. But and I believe I can help unify this party and attract new people to the conservative cause and help reverse the damage Barack Obama has done to America.
Then what are they so frightened about? Are you?
Well, you'll have to ask them. My campaign is not about because I think that. No, I'm not frightened about it because I know that at the end of the day, we are going to nominate someone that can unite our party and attract new people. But we're going to have elections. And at the end of the day, if you don't want someone to be the nominee, then you've got to rally around and support someone else to win. And that's why we have these elections. That's why in about 10 weeks, the voters of Iowa are going to start weighing in. And then a week after that in New Hampshire. And then a week after that in South Carolina. And then Nevada. And then a bunch of early states. So this is the way you move forward and do this. I don't think this election is about any unique individual. And look, you can't ignore the fact that Donald Trump is in first place because he has touched upon something, a nerve, in the American population who are frustrated and angry at a broken political culture. And I think we should spend more time focused on that message, which is Washington is broken because it is out of touch and out of date, and both parties are to blame, and we better nominate someone who's going to change that. And that's the core of my campaign.
Senator Rubio, thank you very much.
Thank you.